Welcome to the Platform Podcast, where we dive deep into the issues shaping our nation's future. Today we're tackling a story that's reigniting national outrage: the dispute over 295 unclaimed bodies at Nairobi's funeral home, formerly known as the City Mortuary. Opposition leaders and civil society groups are protesting the planned disposal of these bodies, alleging many are victims of police violence during the 2024-2025 anti-finance bill demonstrations. We'll explore this from legal, security, human rights, and societal perspectives. Grab a seat as we unpack the layers of accountability, impunity, and the human cost of dissent in Kenya. Let's begin.
First, some background. The anti-finance bill protests erupted in mid-2024, driven by widespread anger over proposed tax hikes that many saw as burdensome amid rising living costs and youth unemployment. What started as peaceful demonstrations by Gen Z activists quickly escalated into nationwide unrest, with reports of excessive force by security agencies. By early 2025, the protests had claimed dozens of lives, with independent tallies far exceeding official figures. Human Rights Watch documented over 50 cases of violations against children alone during these events, while the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights reported 19 fatalities, 531 injuries, and 15 enforced disappearances just from the June 25, 2025 demonstrations. Fast forward to September 2025. Nairobi County announces plans to dispose of 295 unclaimed bodies that have been lying in the mortuary for months. Opposition figures like Kalonzo Musyoka and former Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i are up in arms, questioning, did they fall from the sky? They claim these bodies belong to missing protesters killed by police bullets or abductions. Citizen TV reported the objection, linking it directly to the protest victims. This isn't isolated. Earlier reports from July 2024 noted over 50 unclaimed bodies at the same facility, many with gunshot wounds, and a staggering 247 unidentified bodies received in just 1 month during the height of the protests.
From a human rights lens, this is a glaring case of ongoing impunity. Amnesty International's 2024-25 State of the World's Human Rights Report warns of a shift toward authoritarian practices in Kenya, documenting unlawful killings, enforced disappearances, and the misuse of less lethal weapons during protests. They highlight how African states, including Kenya, are silencing dissent through such tactics. The Law Society of Kenya (LSK) has been vocal, reporting at least 72 to 89 forced disappearances linked to the protests, including activists and human rights defenders. A joint report by Amnesty, International Justice Mission (IJM), and the International Commission of Jurists (ICJ) reveals 104 Kenyans killed by police in 2024 and 55 missing, the highest in 5 years. These aren't just numbers, they're families left in limbo, like those of Daniel Kabusho, Peter Masharia, and others, abducted in June 2024 and never found. Human rights groups argue this violates Kenya's constitution, which guarantees the right to life and protection from arbitrary detention. The International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, which Kenya has ratified, demands investigations and accountability. Yet, as Amnesty notes, a culture of impunity persists, emboldening perpetrators. In regions like Meru and Embu, families face intimidation when seeking autopsies or police reports, further eroding trust.
Legally, this dispute raises critical questions about due process. Under Kenyan law, unclaimed bodies can be disposed of after a certain period, but only after public notices and efforts to identify them. Opposition leaders demand DNA testing and independent probes before any disposal, arguing that rushing this could destroy evidence of crimes. The LSK has called 2025 the year to advocate against enforced disappearances, pushing for ratification of international treaties and domestic reforms. There's also a push for compensation for victims' families, but procedural barriers like ultra-various issues in state processes complicate this. Activists reference the Constitution's provisions for reparations in human rights violations, Yet court orders and bureaucratic hurdles often delay justice. Some, like those in ex posts, are calling for international criminal court involvement, citing potential war crimes cover-ups by figures including Nairobi Governor Johnson Sakaja and President William Ruto. Legally, this could invoke the Rome Statute, but proving state involvement requires robust evidence. Evidence that might be buried with these bodies if disposal proceeds. From a security standpoint, the protests expose deep flaws in policing. The National Police Service, NPS, and Directorate of Criminal Investigations, DCI, have been accused of extrajudicial killings and abductions, with reports of abduction squads hiding bodies in county facilities. This isn't new. The US State Department's 2023 report on Kenya highlighted arbitrary killings and enforced disappearances as significant issues. Security reforms are urgently needed, including independent oversight and training on crowd control to prevent misuse of force. However, the government's focus on counter-terrorism, recently designating groups like the Muslim Brotherhood as terror organizations, diverts attention from internal accountability. Critics argue this creates a security state where dissent is equated with threats, stifling civic space.
Societally, this issue reflects broader fractures in Kenyan society. The protests were fueled by economic inequality, with youth demanding a third liberation from corruption and austerity measures tied to IMF programs. The unclaimed bodies symbolize unresolved grief and distrust in institutions. Families are left without closure, communities traumatized. Social media buzz, like on X, shows outrage over cover-ups, with hashtags like #EndAbductionsKE and Ruto must go now, amplifying calls for justice. This has deepened generational divides, with Gen Z viewing the state as adversarial. On a positive note, civil society mobilization through marches, legal challenges, and reports signals resilience. But without reforms, societal unrest could simmer, leading to more protests. Families of victims are pushing for restorative justice, including compensation, medical support, and counseling to rebuild dignity.
As we wrap up, the dispute over these unclaimed bodies isn't just about the past. It's a litmus test for Kenya's future. Will we see genuine investigations or more impunity? Human rights groups urge the government to halt disposals, conduct probes, and hold perpetrators accountable. For listeners, stay informed, support affected families, and demand transparency. Thanks for tuning in. Follow us for more, and remember, justice delayed is justice denied. Until next time.